I'll pin the message for people, at least the ones who. Okay. Thank you so much for whoever it was. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. Okay. Anyway, so under the category of contradiction, you have then paradox, oxymoron, antithesis, irony, and juxtaposition. For comparison, you have simile, metaphor, and personification. Okay. Is that fine? Now we are going to talk about the third subcategory, which is called repetition. Okay. So we look at the figures of speech which use the technique of repetition to create the rhetorical effect, right? So the first one in that is alliteration, right? So alliteration, again, this is repetition, and this could be repetition of anything. It could be vowel sounds, consonant sounds, any sounds, okay? Vowels or consonants, there's no distinction between which sound is what type of sound is repeated. It could be a vowel sound or a consonant sound. But the condition is that the repeating sounds must be placed adjacent to each other, right? Just look at the first example there. Betty baked buns besides bacons. Now, every time you want to mark a particular, phrase or sentence for alliteration, you have to ensure that the repeating sounds are placed in the adjacent words. Adjacent means the words that are placed next to each other, right? Without anything interfering in between. The word should repeat in the adjacent words, and it should also appear in the initial position. So it has to be in the initial word position. With every word which has that sound, the word should also appear in the beginning of that word. That is how alliterations are produced, right? So I think if people have learned a bit of literature in schools, you have something called Alankar, right? So you call them Anupras Alankar or that matter, not getting into that. But alliteration is something similar to that, right? So wherein any sound, whether vowels or consonants, repeats in adjacent sounds, and while it repeats, it also appears as the first sound of the repeating, of the adjacent words, right? So examples that you have in there: TikTok, Coca-Cola, PayPal, Peppa Pig, Kit Kat, right? All of these are examples of what you call as alliteration, right? So alliteration can either be seen in words or they can also be seen in full-fledged sentences, like is the case in the first example you see here. Understand? Okay. Now, the rest of the things that we are going to look at in the series is basically the same, but the difference is between where and how these or what type of sounds are repeated. That encodes the difference between the next figures of speech. So look at this one. You have assonance, you have consonants, and you have sibilants, right? All the three figures of speech, again, just like alliteration, they use the technique of repetition, but there are a bit of difference between all of them. So assonance, I think it's guessable that we're talking about vowel sounds in assonance. So if the repeating sounds are vowels, then we call it assonance. If the repeating sounds are consonants, we call them consonants. And if the repeating sounds are sibilants are sounds like s, sh, ch, j, zh, right? When you have sibilant sounds like these that repeat in the words um, given in a phrase or a sentence, we call it a sibilance, a case of sibilance, right? So sibilance is also then a subset of the consonants, right? Because you know the s, sh, zh, ch, ch sounds are also consonants, right? So if the question asks you particularly to pick up sibilants, or if your question carries a lot of s, sh sounds, then in the options, if there is consonants and sibilants, then you go ahead and mark sibilants, right? Because that question is asked so that you pick that particular repeating search sounds from there, right? So do not get confused in that. Don't mark consonants, although technically it is right. The answer that they are looking for may not be, you probably are not making an appropriate choice. Okay, it may be technically right, but not what the examiner is trying to test you on. So keep that in mind. But in these three figures of speech, right, assonance, consonants, and sibilants, there's one primary difference between the way repetition happens in these three as opposed to alliteration. What is that difference? In alliteration, what was the condition? How did the repeating sound has to occur in the words?
Ma'am, first sound of two words
Huh.
repeating.
Two adjacent words, right? So
Yes.
they had to be placed next to each other and they also had to appear in the beginning of the word, right? In alliteration.
Ma'am, Kolkata
But
Knight Riders is an alliteration or not?
you tell me, is it an alliteration, Kolkata Knight Riders?
Well,
It's not an alliteration, right?
not, ma'am, but in activity it question it is given as an alliteration, ma'am.
Kolkata Knight Riders.
Yes, ma'am.
I
The
don't
see
know. Huh.
in activity two, it is given as an
Huh.
alliteration.
No. Just send in a mail about that to the discourse or somewhere. I do not think it's a case of alliteration.
Yeah, ma'am, because sound is not same, although letters are same,
Ah,
ma'am.
it's not. It's not. For alliteration, it has to be the same sound repeating in adjacent words in the beginning of the words. Kolkata Knight Riders, the second night, the K is silent, na? It's not even
Yes, ma'am.
audible, so you cannot use it that way. Yeah, just write to us. Please make a note of that and send it to the forum. We'll change it. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Huh. So, yeah, so as opposed to alliteration, assonance, consonance, and sibilance, how would they be different? The condition, so assonance, consonance, and sibilance has no conditions, right? What are the two conditions? The first condition was that they should be adjacent to each other. And the second condition was that it should appear in the beginning of the word. Now, those two conditions are not applicable to assonance, consonance, and sibilance. Okay. So in assonance, consonance, or sibilance, no matter where, right? If in the phrase or in the sentence, if two or more words, right? The condition is only that if there is at least two word, or it doesn't matter, it could be two or more. At least if two words carry the same, sounds somewhere, you know, anywhere in the word, whether in the word initial position or medial or final position, doesn't matter. Somewhere in the word, between two words or more in a phrase, if you have a sound repeating, then the condition for assonance, consonance, and sibilance is satisfied. Okay. The only thing is that if it's a repeating sound is a vowel, then it's a case of an assonance. If it is a consonant sound that is being repeated, then it's a case of consonance. And if it's a sibilant sound, which is the sersha sounds, then it's a case of sibilance, right? So no other conditions. The sounds must repeat in two or more words in the phrase or in the sentence given, right? It doesn't have to be adjacent. It doesn't have to appear in the beginning of the uh, word. So some of the examples you have here, please take a look at this. Um, Jack and Jill went up the hill is a full sentence, right? But you have cases of both assonance and consonance here. So the repetition of the sounds j, right? Here it happens to be in the beginning of the word, but this is not a necessary condition, remember, right? So again, la and la is appearing at the end of the words because this is, more like a rhyme, right? It's a rhyme song. So for that reason, sometimes this can happen, but remember, it's not a necessary condition. Then second thing, too cool for school. Again, the oo sound repeats thrice in that particular phrase, showing us a case of assonance, and then the l sound repeating twice there, showing a case of consonance. Similarly, would be the case for chips and dips, surf and turf, right? Or the very famous seashells on the seashore, the tongue twister. This is again a case of consonance, but a specific case of consonance, which you call sibilance, because you have the sound repeating, right? So if you look at these things, the two conditions that were required for alliteration is not necessary, as you see here, right? Particularly look at the last example here. Hear the loud alarm bells, brazen bells. Two different lines altogether, right? They're not even adjacent to each other. Okay. And when the repeating sounds, when they appear at the end of the words in a poem, we call it a rhyme, right? Usually this technique is used in a poem to produce the rhyme effect, right? Okay. So that's about assonance, consonance, and sibilance. And is there anything else that thrives by repetition? We need to, okay, this one. Anaphora. Now, anaphora is also yet another figure of speech which thrives by technique of repetition, right? Let's look at the examples. Stay home, stay safe. right? One of the adage or slogan that became quite famous during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then there's another poem that you see here by T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland. The first word of each of the line of that poem repeats, right? It's an and every time. So, and fiddled whisper, and bats with baby faces, and crawled head downward, and upside down, and voices. So there's a whatever the purpose of that and is, the poet has used it as a literary device to create a certain kind of a repetitive effect, right? So these kind of examples, so which means it could either appear in the format of a sentence or it can also appear in the format of a small phrase, as in the case of stay home and stay safe, right? Whatever it is, here the repeating component is what? Is it a sound or a word in case of anaphora? What repeats here? Does the sound repeat or does the word repeat? The word.
Word.
The word. So it could be either a word or it could be a sequence of word, right? So, or what we call as a phrase. So it could either be a word repeating or a phrase repeating. But whatever the thing is, it is a technique that uses repetition. Okay. So alliteration, assonance, then consonance, sibilance, all of them, they use the technique of repetition. But in alliteration, assonance, consonance, sibilance, the sounds are the ones that are repeated, while in the case of anaphora, it is the word that gets repeated. Okay, although both use the technique of repetition. So, okay, so I think it's time for us to put it down on our list. So, repetition used by, alliteration, assonance, consonants, sibilance, and then you also have anaphora, right? Anaphora uses word for the repetitive technique. Okay, so that's the third category. Okay, so you have now comparison, contradiction, contrast, and repetition as three categories. Now we go back to a few more things that we have on the list, which is something that they've left out from the previous thing, right? We discussed irony. All of this we discussed, right? What was left in this? Pun we did not. Okay, let's look at pun now. If you look at the examples, there can February, March, no, but April, May. What is happening here in this example?
Two meanings, two inferences can be, there can be two inferences, two interpretations.
Two interpretations or two inferences, or another word that you use for that is the words that you see here, they are also, or the word that is used here is polysemic. Okay, so this is a case of polysemy. Polysemy basically means multiple meanings with connected. Sometimes there's a connected meaning, sometimes there is not, right? An example for that would be words like spring, right? So spring can refer to the name of a season. Spring can also be that device that you use as a metallic, that metallic component that you use to provide friction, right? So that, or spring could be many other things as well. So the word spring can have multiple meanings. So any word that has multiple meanings, we call them polysemic. So this is one figure of speech which thrives on the technique of polysemy, right? So you're making use of the, you're trying to produce, some kind of a, funny or strange effect, some kind of humor you try to create using the capacity of the word to have multiple meanings, right? Okay. So look at the examples there. Can February, March? No, but April, May, right? All the words, particularly which are the words which have a pun on them in this one? First example, can February, March, no, but April, May.
And March and May.
March and May, right? March and May are used to mean in two different ways. Okay. Okay, that's all right. Then there's another category here. This we discussed. Okay, synecdoche. So synecdoche, again, this is a figure of speech wherein the use of a word or phrase can be done in such a way that the part of it can be used to refer to the whole, or the whole of it can be referred to the part, right? So when you mention the part can by default refer to the whole, or when you mention the whole, it also implies the part, right? So this is a case of substitution. This category is called substitution. So either the whole substitutes for the part, or the part substitutes for the whole, right? So we name this category in a broad way as substitution, right? So the first thing that you have in the substitution category is synecdoche. We'll see if we have more, but let's see what this synecdoche is, right? So look at the examples. How did the accident happen? He fell fast asleep on the wheels, right? Wheels referring to the automobile, right? So this is part to whole relation, part to whole substitution. Similarly, how many of you would come for the trekking? Can we have a head count? Head count refers to people. This is again a part to whole substitution, right? Head count substituting for the people. Then the whole to part substitution. I went out for lunch with my friends. Friends here to, here the friends can also refer to, I mean, it could also mean multiple friends, multiple people, but you can also use this sentence to refer to just one friend, right? Contextually, in certain contexts, you can also use this friends to also mean that you're talking about one friend, right? Friends refer to a certain individual and not every person who one considers their friend, right? So this is again a whole to part substitution, right? Do not question the logic of this, because remember that we are talking about figures of speech, right? So it's a figurative language. Do not try and judge it based on the grammaticality judgments. That may not fit here. Okay. Fourth one, the police were at my uncle's shop after the shop adjacent to his reported robbery. So the police here refers to the whole, it doesn't refer to the whole of the department, but it refers to a few officers, representatives, right, from there. So again, this is a whole to part substitution, right? Okay. Next comes metonymy. Now, metonymy is also what? This is also a technique, this is also figure of speech that survives on the technique of substitution. But unlike in synecdoche, there is no whole to part to whole relation in the substituent and the substitutor. But what we have here is a direct substitution, right? So look at the examples here. The Kiwis played well in today's match. Kiwis, it's a referral term that you use to, to address the cricket team that plays for New Zealand, right? Kiwis, right? Particularly in the in writing and even in speech, I think it doesn't draw much of a difference in speech or writing. Both in speech and writing, actually, metonymy is used in the similar way. Okay, so Kiwis as a direct substitution for the New Zealand's cricket team. Now, similarly, if you look at the second example, the White House wished all Indians on the occasion of Diwali. This is basically White House refers to the president of the USA. Okay. And then third one, again, same thing. Decision on the scheme has to be finalized by Delhi. Delhi is basically a direct substitution for the government of India, right? Because it's a seat of the government of India. That's why. And then in India, we speak many tongues referring to the many languages that we spoke. So it's a direct substitution. The relationship is quite direct between what you're substituting and what it is substituted for. Okay. So this figure of speech is called a metonymy, and this also will fall within the category of substitution. So I'm just going to add it there. Let's see if we have anything more in that. So metonymy, light-outs, no. Hyperbole, no. Euphemism, no. Okay. So these are the two things that fall under the substitution category, synecdoche and metonymy. Then I do not know if there is anything else that falls within it. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I missed out on euphemism. What do you think about euphemism? Let's take
And
the
substitution.
example here.
Substitution.
Euphemism is also, yeah, you're right. It's also a kind of substitution, right? But it has a specific purpose. You use a euphemistic expression to substitute a particular word, phrase, or in a situation which when mentioned directly is rude or unpleasant or offensive, right? If you think that mentioning that particular expressing that particular idea or that word is going to be offensive, it's going to be inconvenient for some people, It could sound rude or unpleasant, or in very conservative societies, maybe mentioning certain words is also a taboo, right? There's a social stigma associated with it. So if you're going to if you're going to substitute your parts of your speech, parts of your talk, uh, or some of the words that you use with certain other linguistic devices, other language components, just to overcome this problem of stigma and taboo and unpleasantness and offense and all that, then it is called euphemism, right? So it's a substitution, but then it's a kind of substitution that you do particularly to avoid any kind of unpleasant outcome, or particularly to avoid any kind of offense at anyone's end, right? So some of the examples, something like this: passed away, instead of you saying that someone died, or instead of calling somebody a temporary worker, you call them a guest worker, right? Or you say you've downsized somebody from a job than saying fire them. Okay. Some of this could be a little exaggerated. I mean, one wouldn't be able to say why is it considered taboo. Again, that is a subjective thing, right? It depends on your mindset. If you have a liberal mindset, obviously you may not consider that as a bad thing. But of course, we know these are very culturally situated. In certain cultures, talking openly about certain things or mentioning them directly could be considered problematic, right? So in that situation, euphemistic usage of expressions could be that is where euphemism is actually used or helpful, right? So all of those examples that you have on the screen: well-fed, overweight, outspoken, bossy, correctional facility instead of jail or prison, rehabilitation center instead of de-addiction centers, bridge courses instead of remedial courses, so on and so forth, right? Okay, so this is euphemism, and that's also part of substitution. And then we have just two of them left, and both of them are actually a little special, right? They both work on the principle of exaggeration. Okay, that's the last category I have. So in exaggeration category, one of the figure of speech is used for understatement, and the other one is used for overstatement, right? Light-out is the one that you use for understatement, right? What do we mean by understatement? You're basically negating the existing thing. Look at the examples. Did you make this dish? Not bad. She started her business a few years ago. Now I hear that she's filthy rich. Okay. What he said is not without truth. So there is an element of negation involved here. So you're making an understatement. Instead of saying what he said is not without truth, instead of saying what he said is not truth, you're saying not without truth. Okay. Or instead of saying, did you make this dish good? You're saying not bad. Right. So you're making an understatement. So you're exaggerating the claim by making an understatement. Right. Similarly, in the case of hyperbole, let me change the. In the case of hyperbole, is the opposite. You're exaggerating by making an overstatement, right? It's raining cats and dogs. There was a pin drop silence in the class. He's a very funny person. I died laughing at his jokes. So died laughing, pin drop silence, raining cats and dogs, waiting forever, right? Speak so sweet, get a cavity from all the talking. Again, exaggeration, case of an exaggeration, but this time making an overstatement, right? So both hyperbole and light outs, they thrive on exaggeration, but one is a kind of exaggeration which, negates and makes an understatement. The other one is which overemphasizes and then gives an overstatement, right? Says more than what is required. So that is about light outs and hyperbole. Just give me a moment. I'm writing it down for you in the chat. Yeah. Okay. So these are the 6 odd categories I think that we have into which you can divide all these 20 odd figures of speech. It will make your life a little easier. Okay. When you're trying to revise this. So you have comparison, contradiction or contrast category, repetition category, polysemy category, which only has the pun, by the way, then substitution, and then exaggeration, right? So you can use this, if you may, in order to, categorize all of these and then try and understand it better. I hope you have understood the differences between juxtaposition and, paradox, juxtaposition and oxymoron and paradox and irony. All of those also just keep in mind. Okay, if that is there, then it should be better. Next week, for the next week's class, now I think it's almost time. So for the next class, I have a worksheet for this as well. I have a set of questions. So the first 15-20 minutes, we'll deal with that particular workshop before we take up the session for the topic for the next class, right? So we'll be discussing most probably, I think, adverbs, right, in the next session. But the first 15 minutes, we'll solve that worksheet and then go to the adverbs. Okay. Meanwhile, try and do some revision with this. Okay. Any questions before we wind up for today?
Ma'am, activity one problem is there actually.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. 1 minute. Ma'am, do not go gentle into that good night.
Do not, sorry.
Ma'am, do not go gentle into that good night.
Do not go gentle into
that good night.
Okay, that good night. Yeah.
The figure of speech options are given are simile, metaphor, adjective, and no figure of speech. So
repeat this thing for me. Repeat the options.
Simile. Metaphor.
Okay.
Adjective, and option 4 is no figure of speech.
Okay. Simile, metaphor, adjective.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
No figure of speech, fourth option.
This could be metaphor, but I think, is this like from a poem or something?
Yes, ma'am. I think context is not given here, so we can't infer.
Oh, context is not given. It's just a plain sentence.
Plain sentence.
If that is the case, then you can just go ahead and mark it as a metaphor, because for it to be a simile, you should either have a like or as something statement.
Yes, I marked as no figure of speech, ma'am. No figure of speech may not be, because if you look at the statement, it's not a direct statement, right? Do not go gentle into that good night. That good night, it does infer, it does tell you that there is a figure of speech involved. So since it is clearly not a simile, and adjective, of course, is not a figure of speech. So I think metaphor works, because it is a metaphor if you look at it. That good night. Ma'am, but context should be given. Earlier sentence, preceding sentence should be. Usually they don't give you that. It's a little tricky, but I don't think with the exams you will get that kind of questions. It's actually not a very good question. I agree. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is from some author called Dylan's. I have googled actually. Dylan Thomas's poem. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, poetry, usually at least there should be 4 lines for the person to judge. If it's a single line, then I understand why it is difficult. It's okay. But to answer your question, so tell me one thing, is the question, does it have anything like an underlined portion or something? No, ma'am. No. Okay. All right. So just for your knowledge, that into that good night is is the place which has the figure of speech, and that's a simple metaphor. That's all. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Someone else, Khushi, you have a question? Khushi Rani? No?
Understood, ma'am. Clear.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Then I'll see you next week again. We'll do the worksheet, and then we'll proceed with the discussion on adverbs. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Sure. Thank you so much. See you. And I don't think the initial few minutes, maybe 10-15 odd minutes, was recorded. My bad. But I think we have covered what I've discussed in the rest of the discussions as well. So it shouldn't be a problem. So those of them who are not able to join, they can always access this in the recordings. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. See you again.